You need, first of all, to understand what you're educating for. But I don't think that is a mystery. I think we know what society's needs are. I think what has to happen is curriculum reform and not piecemeal. Somebody has to be brave enough to understand that the present curriculum is not working for a lot of people. To be an effective teacher, you must establish good relationships with the students. This is what I was meant to be, a teacher, someone working with young people. When I'm in the classroom, I do not think about status quo. I'm there with a group of young people that, as far as I am concerned, I need to work with to try to make them better at what we are doing together. People's minds, the young mind, it needs to be nurtured. That students do not care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Welcome to another episode of The Blueprints with Dr. Jelani I, Reid. I am your host, Dr. Jelani Reid, medical doctor by profession, activist by passion, and a lifelong student of life, learning, transformation, and the works. Today is a special day for me, as we will be having a conversation with someone that I hold very dear, and someone that I know the College of Queen's Royal College holds very dear. He is an educator. We know him as the former principal of QRC and a teacher. Mr. Lennard Hinkson has been responsible for the educating of hundreds, thousands of young men who are shapers of society, leaders of industry, and making significant change in whatever role and responsibility that they hold dear. Now, clearly, there has to be some plan or some procedure or some roadmap or some blueprint that our next guest has, and we are going to be exploring that. So, audience of The Blueprint, assist me in welcoming Mr. Lennard Hinkson.
Thank you, Jelani, Dr. Reid. Thank you very much for your kind words and introduction. And you almost make it sound as if I have the answers to our education woes. I actually don't, but I do enjoy working in education, and maybe I can share some ideas, some experiences that could be of use to someone, somewhere, sometime.
Well, let's see. Let's dive right into it. So, Mr. Hinkson, we know you as a teacher. We know you as a dean of discipline. We know you as a principal. Did you always want to be an educator?
Nope. And if anyone had told me I would be in education, I would be a teacher, I would have laughed. That would be a joke to me. I actually, in my younger days, always said I wanted to be a doctor, a medical doctor. And I actually applied to Howard University to do pre-med, and I was accepted. And things changed, and let's just say I ended up in teaching, and I realized that it was, in fact, my calling because it gave me tremendous satisfaction over the years.
So, Mr. Hinkson, you said an interesting thing where you said you believe it was your calling. How did you know, and at what stage did you realize that it was your calling?
Well, I think that whatever job we find ourselves in, we're supposed to be enjoying it, because at a certain point in your life, you spend most of your time on your job. And if your job makes you miserable, then something is wrong. You need to get out of it. I cannot think of a day that I went to my job and did not enjoy it. And when it was time, when I decided to leave, I look back on my career, and it was so fulfilling. So, I realized this is what I was meant to be, a teacher, someone working with young people.
So, you got accepted to pre-med.
Yes.
And you are now a former principal of a school.
Yes.
What or who motivated you to enter the education system?
You want me to disclose personal secrets?
Honest conversations.
Honest conversation. Okay, suffice it to say, when I graduated from Queen's Royal College as a student, I decided to take a break from studies, and I applied, like a lot of people at the time did, for a job in what was the civil service. I was appointed as a Clerk 1 in no other place but Queen's Royal College. I ended up being the accounts clerk in the office at Queen's Royal College. I worked for 6 months. I applied for vacation leave, and I was told that I needed to work a year before I was entitled to vacation leave. So I quit the job. I went on vacation, came back to Trinidad looking for a job, and decided, well, I can't apply to the government, to the civil service. Like, let me try something else. Teaching was the next best thing. So I applied for teaching. That's how I got into it. Never looked back.
Oh. So, okay, you started and entered the teaching profession.
Mm-hmm.
What was your vision back then as a teacher for the classroom? Were you continuing the status quo at the time, or did you want to add your own flair to it?
That's an interesting question, because somehow when I'm in the classroom, I do not think about status quo. I'm there with a group of young people that, as far as I am concerned, I need to work with to try to make them better at what we are doing together. That was my approach. So the administration, the idea of a system, all of those notions were out of my mind. I was there with a group of young people needing to do better in our business there for 45 minutes, 40 minutes, and I just had to work with them to raise their level. I never thought of status quo or anything of the sort. Just working to make these young people better at whatever we were doing together.
So, Mr. Hinkson, an average class has about 30 to 35 students.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, parenting differences, and even the ability to learn.
Mm-hmm.
That and one person standing in front of a class, trying to complete a curriculum and a syllabus.
Yeah.
What was your approach to that?
Another interesting question. That has, I can go in so many different directions with that question. First and foremost, I think the ratio you just described there, 1 to 30, how much? I think that's a challenge. It's a problem that we have in the system that we can't seem to do anything about at present, or we do not wish to do anything about. I think any educator would agree that is not the ideal ratio, student-teacher ratio, to do the best for our charges. That can't be the best ratio. But be that as it may, I think I was fortunate to work in a school like Queen's Royal College that really prioritized not curriculum completion, but developing the young mind. And that helped. So it meant first of all, establishing a relationship with your charges, no matter how many. And you're right, Queen's Royal College had an intake from all walks of life. We had very privileged students. We had very challenged students. Most of our students were academically gifted, but notwithstanding that, some of them had learning challenges. But again, because of the kind of school Queen's Royal College is, there was always an avenue for students who were academically challenged in one way or another to be evaluated, so we could level the playing field for them. So everybody was, more or less competing on a level playing field. That helped. My approach, and I think the approach of any teacher who is really interested in lifting the level, working towards the genuine development of the student, It would be to meet that student where he is, not where the system or the curriculum says he ought to be, but meet him at his level and work with him from there. And you can't do that if you are only focused on the academic aspect, because there are so many issues that get between teacher and that subject he's trying to teach. You have to sort of clear away the interferences to get the student to really tune in to what you are trying to give him.
So, an interesting story, Mr. Hinkson. I don't know if you recall, but I wasn't the best Form 1 student at the college. And, I would have had to be spoken to quite a few times by the dean at the time. And from that situation, I would have had to be called into the principal's office. And
was I the principal at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
And one of the remarks that you would have indicated, would have made, was that how do you intend to lead the class or lead your peers if you are not performing well? From coming in my 20s in placement, in Form 2, that moved to, I believe, my first term in Form 1, I ranked 7th in the class.
So that one question made that difference?
Yes.
I needed to ask more students that question.
Now, there's a reason why I brought that story.
Uh-huh.
And it is to really get from you your philosophy as an educator. Understanding what do you believe the role of an educator is for a student, for the community, and for the society.
Okay, so there are two things about that. To me, that guide the teacher. One is almost a cliche. That's almost a cliche in education. They don't care how much you know. Teacher comes into the classroom, he thinks that he knows more than anybody else. No, they don't care about your knowledge. What they care more about is that you care about them. And once the student realizes that, they will do almost anything for you, and that's what you want. You want the student to be interested in what you are bringing to him. The other aspect was that as a teacher in the classroom, it is so important to understand, and it's related to the point I just made. It's important for the teacher to understand you are not teaching a subject. You are teaching students. Right. The subject should always be like the vehicle.
Okay.
So you focus on the fact that I'm teaching a person. Yes. I'm not in there teaching mathematics, or that's a vehicle. And once you realize that it is a person, and that's why I speak about working with the student, because it's supposed to be a collaboration. As long as students realize that you are sort of apart from them, you are looking down on them, you're almost wanting to pour information into a vessel. That doesn't make for a receptive mind. When they realize that you are working alongside them, that you are there to help them to understand where they are, and you're willing to bring them along, that you understand that they are a person, a human being with all kinds of needs. If you do not see the student like that, then half of your job becomes more difficult, because they are not as receptive to you as you would like them to be. And you almost defeat the purpose. Sometimes, in my experience, I taught Spanish and French, general paper as well. Sometimes I recall over the years, I go into class, I have my lesson prepared. I start teaching the lesson, and then I realize, wait a minute, I can't continue, because we're just not clicking. Mm-hmm. And I would stop, and my students, they got to know me, because I would say, if you are with me, I would pick up the vibes. That is not happening. So I would forget about my lesson for the day, and we would just talk to sort of get them back on track. And someone might think that that's a lesson, that's 45 minutes, 40 minutes lost. It isn't lost. Because just that session where you sort of bring everybody back together, you're going to move so much faster when you resume perhaps the next day. And it all has to do with recognizing that you're teaching young minds. It's not robots, and they come to you with all kinds of issues. And sometimes you have to address those issues before you can do anything else.
So, interesting, and I'm actually going to come back to that point with something else. But Ms. Hinkson, so you would have taught for many years a Spanish, French, and general people teacher. You would have moved to become Dean of Discipline at some point of time.
And studies.
And then moved on to become the head honcho, the principal of Queen's Royal College.
Vice principal first.
Yes, vice principal and then principal.
Yeah.
How was that transition for you?
It's a very interesting. Listen, I went into Queen's Royal College interested in teaching. I was enjoying my teaching. I come to school. I was happy working with the boys. I was enjoying it. And then in my second year at Queen's Royal College, and I consider myself a newbie on staff, I had met teachers in the staff room who had taught me. And in my second year at the college, the principal, at the end of that second year, the principal called me into his office and he said to me, he wanted me to be the senior dean of the school. Of course, that shocked me because that was nowhere in my mind. I was just happy to come and teach administration. That was nowhere in my mind. I laughed because I thought he was joking. Yeah. And I realized I was the only one laughing. He was serious. And I thought maybe I needed time to think about it. And then I said, perhaps he is seeing something in me that I am not seeing in myself. I decided to give it a try. And people said I was a very effective dean. And then I never, when the position of vice principal was advertised, I submitted my application on the very last day. Because again, I just wanted to teach. I wasn't really interested in that. But by that time, I was working so closely with the administration of the school, and people felt that the vice principal's job, I would be effective in that position. And on the very last day, the deadline for submission of applications, that was when I was encouraged to submit my application. I did. And the same thing happened for principal. I had said to my predecessor, I'm not interested in being principal. And no one believed me until the deadline for applications for principal, deadline came and went, and I did not apply because I was serious. A supervisor from the Ministry of Education walked across and said to me, Mr. Hinkson, the college community expects you to be XYZ, and if you submit your application, I'm still prepared to accept, we will accept it. And that's how I submitted it, and the rest is history. It was a smooth transition for me up the ranks because I enjoyed working with the students. I thought it was always important to get to know any student. I thought they will tell you, I knew them. It was not just a teacher teaching a subject. I got to know the students. So I understood where they were coming from. And so moving from dean, as a dean of discipline and subsequently dean of studies, to me it was a smooth transition. And then into vice principal, well, I was doing some of that work anyway. So the only thing that was a little difficult for me, when I became vice principal, I wanted to continue teaching. Right. And I did try to, I kept some classes, but then I realized it wasn't fair to the students because, the vice principal, there were so many interruptions.
Yeah, meetings.
Yeah, so I realized I could not teach. that was the only thing that was difficult for me, having to give it up. But to me, it is all about establishing a relationship with the students, with all of the students, so they know that you are there for them.
So we started off with having responsibility for about 30 students. So now having responsibility for 700 plus students and a staff of between 60 to 7 adults. Clearly your approach had to be a bit different. What was the difference?
Well, I remember when I was presented to the staff as vice principal, when the school supervisor came to, present me as vice principal, I remember saying to the staff that I have no illusions in my mind. I had no illusions of being that I'm able to do this on my own. I know it has to be a team effort. And that was always very clear in my mind. I'm the vice principal, I'm the principal, but I cannot do it alone. If I isolate my staff, if I behave as if I know it all, I don't need any input, it's going to come crashing down. And so I made it my business, similarly, to have good relationships for the most part, because they will all, on any staff, a staff of 60 plus, which is the size of the Queen's Royal College staff, you will have a few people who are difficult, for want of a better way of putting it. But generally speaking, I had good relationships with my teachers. I respected them. And we had teams, in secondary schools and I guess primary schools as well, you have subject departments and you have year levels. And so you have a head of science, head of math, head of modern languages, and so on. And the principal works with the heads generally. And likewise, you have deans of the various year levels. You have the Form 1 dean, the Form 5 dean, the Form 4 dean, and so on. So you keep tabs on what is happening in the school by liaising frequently and closely with the heads of departments and with the year level deans, and that makes it easy. But again, just as I say about the students, that for you to be an effective teacher, you must establish good relationships with the students. You must respect them. You must get to know them, to the point that they understand that you really care about them. And it's a similar approach for the teachers. I mean, we are all human beings, and you expect that teachers will come to school on any given day with issues on their minds concerning their personal life. And you cannot behave as if they are machines, that they have a job to do and that's all you are concerned about. You relate to them knowing that they are human beings. You respect them, you respect their needs, and they will work with you. So it has to be a collaborative approach. I have to tell you though, so many things are rushing through my mind. I have to tell you that any principal would have the opportunity to liaise with principals of other schools, because principals' meetings are common. Right. So I was in Port of Spain and environ, so I got to know the principals in schools in and around Port of Spain. And I listened to these stories, but you also know, you have an idea of what goes on in other schools, because there are times when you have principals' meetings for all of the principals, and you hear these stories. And so people might have found me unreasonable, but I always blamed principals when the discipline in schools was falling apart. I always blame principals. And people would say to me, Lennard, it's because you are the kind of school you are in, you don't have the kinds of problems that we have. And I know that is true. I still blame them, because I think there were ways around the issues that you do not have to have your school so chaotic.
My aunt had has a saying. She says that when the student didn't learn, it means the teacher didn't teach. So I understand the concept that
well, that is a fact. There is no teaching without learning.
Correct.
If learning hasn't taken place, then, and that brings me to another point. If I may, criticize might not be the best word, but it's the word that comes to mind now. If I may criticize the education system, to me, something that is fundamentally wrong with the way the system is set up. I don't know if you. Okay, well, you are a young person, and medicine is your field, not exactly in education. But there is this concept in education, especially in more modern times, of reflective practice.
Right.
This is how teachers are supposed to be proceeding. So when you teach a lesson, for example, you take time to reflect on how the lesson went. Mm-hmm. Because typically, you're going to be teaching that lesson sometime in the future, maybe to another group of students. So it is always a good thing, and it is encouraged to reflect on what you've done in the classroom, how it went, and so, with a view to improving the next time around.
All right.
But it always occurs to me, how are teachers expected to do this when you are timetabled, the timetable in your school has, let's say, 7 periods a day, and you are timetabled for 7 classes a day, or for 6 classes out of the 7. When are you going to get time to reflect? When are you going to get time to sit and decide, okay, I taught this lesson to Form 3A, after teach it to Form 3B tomorrow. How did it go with this first group of students? Is there anything I need to modify? It didn't go as well as I wanted it to. Why? So that when I present it to another group, it will be a better lesson for them. Where is the time for that?
Correct.
Teachers are made to be rushing from class to class, no time to reflect on their practice. And I think something is very wrong with that. Now, it all comes down to dollars and cents.
Correct.
If you're going to correct that, it means you need more staff.
Mm-hmm.
More staff, more money, so it just doesn't happen.
Correct.
And I think that is sad. And likewise, earlier when I mentioned a thing about evaluating students, so those students who have challenges, I wouldn't call his name, but for example, we had a student in Queen's Royal College. He had a learning disability. The boy was bright,
Right.
but he was not operating on a level playing field because of his learning challenge.
Right.
We had him evaluated. And when we had the documentation that he had this challenge, the examination boards, at CXC, for example, they have concessions
Right.
depending on what the challenge is.
Correct.
And when he was given the assistance he needed, he got not just a scholarship, an open scholarship, because his playing field was level for him. Now, if that evaluation wasn't done, his performance would have been mediocre. And to me, it must not only be Queen's Royal College and a few other, people say so-called prestige, I wouldn't say so-called because they are indeed prestige schools. It should not only be Queen's Royal College that operates like that. I think regardless of the school a student attends, he should be offered the opportunity to be evaluated if there is a suspicion or any indication of a learning disability, so that he is allowed to perform at his best always.
So, Mr. Hinkson, you served as a teacher, a dean, administrator, and we want to end this segment with that aspect of being an administrator. And throughout, we'd have heard of the successes, we would have heard of your philosophy. But as a principal, not only did you have the responsibility of the care and attention of your student, your charges and the teachers, but you had to lead them. And in leadership, there are challenges. What was one of the challenges that you had as principal, and how did you overcome it?
Another interesting question. One of the challenges is that adults know everything, or at least they think they know everything. And bright adults, they are sure they know everything. So if you're working in a school like Queen's Royal College, you have your academic staff, they are academically gifted people in the main.
Yes.
And so they know everything.
Yeah.
So you as principal, your approach is not a sledgehammer approach, because as I said earlier, you want people to work with you. So, but there's a reason you are principal, there's a reason you are the leader. It's either because of experience or something more that you have. I don't think you get a job because you are somebody's friend, or at least I should hope not. It is something that qualifies you to be allowed to lead this group. And if there is somebody on your staff, or if there are members of your staff who behave as if they know more than you, then you have to bring them around gently. You still have to work with them. It is counterproductive to alienate them. Yeah. And likewise, Queen's Royal College has always been, and I know still is, a school that works very closely with parents. And because of our intake, like we said, we get students from all walks of life. We have some very high-powered parents who would dictate. They seek to dictate for you. You are the leader, but they will try to dictate for you. You have to be watchful about that too. You welcome the assistance of parents, and that's very important. I don't think any school should try to operate without the input of parents. We keep our parents close to us at Queen's Royal College. But again, just as you have members of staff who do not always behave as if the leader is due a certain amount of respect, and you have to deal with that diplomatically without alienating them. But the parent group is the same thing. The parents who are more high power than you are, because if you have a senior counsel who is a parent, or a minister who is a parent, you have to ensure that they understand that the head of the school is you. Okay. They are not the head of the school. But you have to do it diplomatically. And you try to keep everybody focused on the same vision. Your vision, of course, has to be very clear.
I thought that you would have indicated that one of your biggest challenges would have been the introduction of student government and and all the fun things that keep with it.
If I have the time, let me just say a word about student government. Student government at Queen's Royal College was a delight. It was a delightful thing. And I remember I was in a principal's meeting at the Learning Resource Center. Dr. Gopi Singh was the Minister of Education at the time. And in this meeting, he talked about student councils. And he asked the principals if there was anything happening in their schools with student councils that they thought could be shared with other principals. Well, by that time I was as you know, Jelani, I was very excited about what was happening at Queen's Royal College with our student council, which you all had renamed Student Affairs Initiative. Correct. And before that, it was called Student Empowerment Association. Correct. All of these interesting labels that you students yourselves came up with. So when Dr. Gopi Singh asked if any principal wanted to comment, I was very happy to go to the microphone and share with him that there was something interesting and unique happening at Queen's Royal College with our students. And I actually shared that I do not know of any other student council, as it's called in, I guess, most other schools. I do not know of any other student council that operates the way the Student Affairs Initiative at Queen's Royal College operated, where, for example, I think you call it the Student Disciplinary Committee.
And Supreme Courts.
And yeah, you had some kind of court system. So you, the students, were actually saying to us, and I think it was marvelous. You were actually saying to us, members of staff, so-and-so student infringed the rules, but leave him to us. We will discipline him. We will bring him before our student court, and we will deal with the disciplinary issue. When you have students working to keep one another, to keep themselves in check, I think you can't get more effective than that. Students are more likely to listen to one another than they are to listen to their teachers when it comes to disciplinary matters. They all know when they're going wrong. They know what the rules are. They know when they are infringing the rules, but they still do. Yeah. Why do they? And I think, some students infringe the rules, others never do. Mm-hmm. If those who are inclined to go the wrong way can hear from those who are more inclined to follow the rules, mm-hmm. if there can be a discussion, to me, that is so productive and effective. And that was happening at Queen's Royal College. So I do not know, I dare to say that we had the most effective student government body among schools in Trinidad and Tobago.
So, Mr. Hinkson, we would have discussed who Lennard Hinkson is, the philosophy behind how you went about conducting your affairs as a teacher, educator, as a principal. We would have heard some of the challenges. We'd have heard your leadership style. Now let's take it to a wider context of the education system of Trinidad and Tobago. You were once a student, you were once an educator, you were once an administrator, and I guess in your retirement age you continue to be a citizen of the Republic looking on. What's your view of the education system and how can we improve it? Now, before you get there, I want to add a perspective. This is a pet peeve of mine. Our education system tends to rely on and push heavily on academics. And I always found it as a lost opportunity where you have talented young people, dance, music, and we do not have a space at the young age, primary, secondary school, where we have our own version of the Juilliards, so that they, from a very young age, they are placed into these schools where the basics of their academic achievements are sorted out. But, we push their talents. In that context, what's your view?
I want to believe that the majority of our citizens would share my view that the education system of our country is not doing for young people what we would all like it to do. Some say that this education system is failing students. I wouldn't make such a generalization because obviously there are many students who are succeeding commendably with the education setup that we have, but certainly many students are not. And you know that there are schools churning out thousands of young people every year who are basically dysfunctional. So something is dreadfully wrong. And I think, you sort of put your finger on it when you talked about having an avenue for students who are inclined to the arts, to have some avenue to express those talents, to have it developed and so on. But you talked about the academic slant, and that is it. Why is it that we are still expecting every young person to get 5 CXC passes? Is there some magic in that number 5? Who came up with that? Why must it be 5? And why must it be these chosen subjects? And even the schools that are considered low-performing schools, even these schools are expected their students to work towards getting these 5 subjects in the same time frame. So you go in 5 years, if I am a top student in the top school in Trinidad and Tobago, I am expected to get at least 5 passes. And if I'm in the lowest performing school, I am expected to get 5 subjects as well. That makes no sense.
Correct.
It makes no sense. Now, I have no doubt that the powers that be, let's just say the Ministry of Education and its functionaries, they understand fully well the folly of that expectation. They also know that change is needed, as in yesterday. But I think part of the problem is, I think the problem is twofold. One is nobody wants to rock the boat. And secondly, rocking the boat would involve cost. And it always, or more often than not, it comes down to the cost, financial investment. Do you think our society can get by without masons, without refrigerator repair people, without air condition repair people, without carpenters? Can we get by without all of these people?
No.
And yet, schools are still all pushing a traditional academic curriculum. I am not saying anything new. This is well known. Why is it not being changed?
So, therefore, the question comes from, how do we create a fit-for-purpose education system for the Trinidad and Tobago context?
Well, fit for purpose. So you need, first of all, to understand what you're educating for. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that is a mystery. Mm-hmm. I think we know what society's needs are. I think what has to happen is curriculum reform and not piecemeal. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to be brave enough to understand that the present curriculum is not working for a lot of people. It needs to be changed. Decide what changes you need to effect to the curriculum so that it dovetails with society's needs. Now, that is one aspect of it. The other aspect is recognizing that students are different. So you do have very many students who would follow the traditional academic route. You have others who are clearly not that way inclined. So it might be like the attempt was made years ago where you had junior secondary schools set up. They were never meant to follow the traditional academic curriculum. And something went dreadfully wrong. But you need to have schools that students who are more interested in what people like to call a trade. Mm-hmm. There's nothing is wrong with that. And I think nowadays, the majority of people recognize that, value and respect tradesmen. Mm-hmm. So have schools that would prepare people to become proficient in a trade. You keep the traditional curriculum, yes, because we still need our lawyers, we still need teachers, we still need doctors. So you still need people to follow that curriculum, but you need to expand and make provisions for the non-academically inclined individuals. And that requires, sometimes I believe that sometimes you have to bring everything to a halt, yes, for change to take place. I do not see any intention. People recognize that something is wrong. They even recognize what needs to happen. And when I say people, I'm referring to the powers that be, more specifically people who are under the umbrella of the Ministry of Education. They understand what needs to be done, but the will to make the change, the audacity, perhaps, to make the change, the finances, which I know they have to get voted for them. Those things are not, somebody has to make those things, put those things in place.
Yes.
Until they do, we are continuing we are going to be continuing the downward slide that we are obviously on.
So, Mr. Hinkson, so I've heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in 2025,
Mm-hmm.
and time continues, and we are moving into a more technological world.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall even back then, over 10, 15 years ago, as principal, you were an advocate for technology.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when you would, I can't recall in what capacity, either as student body president or as a student, you were telling us about the smart boards initiative that you wanted to have. What role do you believe, and I also know that the Ministry of Education, in their current curricular reform, they are pushing for digital transformation and introducing technology into the school system. What role do you see technology playing in the education system?
Well, I think the answer to that question is pretty obvious. If we are not prepared to embrace technology, we will become an anachronism.
So, look, I'm going to push it a little bit more. Now, there are some persons who would believe, I guess as educators, that the more you introduce technology into the school system, the less there's a need for educators. What's your opinion about that?
The people who are of that opinion do not understand the role of a teacher. Earlier, I said that a teacher, that person who stands in a classroom as a teacher, must understand that he's not there to teach a subject. He's there to teach a person, to teach people. Technology can't do that. People's minds, the young mind, it needs to be nurtured. I also made a statement that I refer to as a cliche, that students do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. Technology can't provide caring.
Well,
so there is that role for teachers. Technology cannot address the human needs of students. I think you know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
yes.
Technology can't address that. They can't make sure that those needs are properly addressed. So there will always be a need, a place for the human element. Okay. The technology will always remain a tool to be used by the human beings.
So, Mr. Hinkson, there's something that we do on Blueprints called a Rapid Blue, where we're going to get to know you, the individual, a bit more. So I'm going to ask you some quick questions. The first thing that comes to your mind, we want to hear your response. All right? Okay, so the first question is, what is the best piece of advice that you were ever given?
So the first thing that comes to my mind, be yourself.
Deep. What is your favorite book or film?
My favorite book is Animal Farm.
So you're the reason why we have that in literature?
No. It preceded me. I also had it as a literature text as a student at QRC.
Okay. Tea or coffee?
Tea.
What's the first thing that you do in your morning routine?
Comb my hair.
So, Mr. Hinkson, if you had the opportunity to speak to your younger self, what would you tell him?
I don't even know how I can answer that question, because I really don't know, because I so enjoyed my youth. I don't know what I would say to my younger self. Maybe be a little more outgoing, because I wasn't always as outgoing as I turned out to be. So maybe that's what I would say.
Okay. And who was the biggest influence on you?
Professionally or?
As an individual?
It would have to be my mom. Yeah. Professionally, it's a man called Winston Douglas, who was a former principal, was principal of Queen's Royal College. Yeah.
Wow. So, members of the Blueprint audience, thank you very much, Mr. Hinkson.
My pleasure.
For this. in our conversation and discourse here today, we would have learned about the career path of an educator. We would have learned about the philosophy of Mr. Lennard Hinkson and his view of what the ideal education system for Trinidad and Tobago should and ought to be. He has given us practical advice as students. He has given us advice as educators, what is our role and responsibility to the students. He has given us advice on the role of parenting and as well as administrators, movers and shakers in the education system. And from that, we know that as individuals, one, from Mr. Hinkson's own life story, sometimes life hits you. You have a plan for one thing, and then life has another plan for you. Who take full embrace of it and push forward. Stay focused, stay inspired, and ensure that you begin to map out your blueprint for tomorrow. Thank you, and we'll see you on another episode of The Blueprint with Dr. Jelani Reid.